I want to start with a question for you, and I need you to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Are you actually engineering your sleep, or are you just chasing it?
That's a great question because it feels like most of us are just chasing it.
Right. We're running after it with a butterfly net. We see it in January 2026. It's everywhere. We buy the weighted blankets. We drink the chamomile tea. We track all this data on our wrists until we're, completely neurotic about our sleep score.
And of course, the big one. We are popping melatonin gummies like they're candy.
Exactly. But we have a huge stack of research on the desk today. And the centerpiece, honestly, it's a document that kept me up last night. It's titled Neurobiological Frontiers of Sleep Architecture.
It sounds a little dry, I'll admit.
The title does, but the implications are anything but. We're talking about a fundamental rewriting of how we understand the relationship between your brain, your heart, and, well, that little bottle of gummies on your nightstand.
It really is a paradigm shift. And that's a term we hear a lot, but this time it fits. Usually when we look at sleep research, it's incremental. Put down your phone 5 minutes earlier. Small tweaks.
Sure, minor adjustments.
But this is different. We're looking at data that came out of the American Heart Association sessions late last year, late 2025, and it is completely reshaping how we view the safety of what many of us consider a harmless supplement.
We're calling this deep dive the search for the best slept self. And, that sounds a bit aspirational, maybe like a brochure for a yoga retreat.
A little bit, yeah.
But the reality this research uncovers is a lot grittier. We are effectively living in an epidemic of sleep insufficiency. We are tired, we are wired, and the central tension here is that the very tool millions of people are using to fix it, chronic melatonin use, might be doing more harm than good.
A lot more harm. In fact, it might be dangerous.
It's a classic case of what I'd call the biological shortcut, right? We want the result, sleep, but we don't respect the process that gets us there.
We treat the body like it's a machine, like you can just hit an off switch. But the source material today forces us to look at the machinery itself. Before we even think about trying to hack the system, we have to actually decode how the engine is supposed to run.
And we are going to get deep into the weeds on that today. I really want to go beyond the surface level. We need to understand the two-process model, which I know sounds like a corporate efficiency strategy.
Right, something from a business seminar.
But it's actually the fundamental physics of your brain and sleep. Then, we're going to do a forensic analysis of that shocking heart failure data from 2025.
And that's the part that really is a bombshell.
And then, because we're not just here to scare everyone off their supplements, we're going to lay out what the research calls the gold standard toolkit for achieving that best slept self.
And I should probably warn you, it's going to require some work. The gold standard is not a pill.
No shortcuts.
No. It involves things like behavioral hygiene, something called a digital sunset, and even some protocols that are used by the military to force recovery in extremely high-stress zones.
So, settle in. We have a lot to unpack. The source material starts by describing the sleep-wake cycle as a physiological masterpiece of temporal coordination. I mean, that's a heavy phrase.
It is, but it's scientifically precise. It tells you right away that sleep isn't just the absence of being awake. It's not a passive state where your brain just shuts down for 8 hours.
It's an active, complex performance.
It is an orchestrated series of events. It's a symphony, and the primary conductor is a tiny region in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN.
The SCN.
The master clock. The master clock. But to understand why you might be staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, or why you crash so hard at 3 in the afternoon, you really have to start with this two-process model.
Right, this is the engine room. The text breaks it down into process S and process C. Let's start with process S.
Okay, so process S is the homeostatic drive, but I find it easier to think of it as a pressure gauge.
Okay, a pressure gauge.
Or even better, think of your brain like a car engine. From the moment you wake up in the morning, that engine is running, it's on, and like any engine, it produces exhaust.
Exhaust. So there's a literal physical byproduct of just being awake.
Exactly. And that chemical byproduct is called adenosine. Every single time a neuron in your brain fires, it doesn't matter if you're solving a complex math problem, walking your dog, or just stressing about an email you have to send, you are burning cellular fuel.
The fuel is ATP, right? Adenosine triphosphate.
That's the one. And the byproduct of that burn is adenosine. And it accumulates specifically in a region called the basal forebrain.
So let me get this straight. The longer I'm awake, the more of this exhaust, this adenosine, fills up the tank in my brain.
That's precisely right. And this accumulation is what we call sleep pressure. As those adenosine levels rise throughout the day, they start to bind to receptors in the brain that, in turn, slow down neural activity.
So it's like a built-in braking system.
It is. It creates that heavy sensation you feel behind your eyes after a long day. It's a very clear biological signal of fatigue. It's your body's way of saying, hey, the tank is getting full of waste. We need to shut down the system and clean it up.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's my question. If process S is just a fuel gauge running on empty, why can I be exhausted at 4 p.m., drink a double espresso, and suddenly feel fine an hour later? Did the coffee somehow, suck the exhaust out of my brain?
That is the great illusion of caffeine. It's probably one of the most misunderstood mechanisms in our daily lives. Caffeine is what we call an adenosine antagonist.
An antagonist, so it's working against it.
It's working against it, but not in the way you think.
Really?
It doesn't remove the adenosine. It doesn't clean the tank. All it does is park itself in the receptor sites where the adenosine is supposed to dock.
So it's blocking the sensor.
It's blocking the sensor. Think of it like putting a small piece of black tape over the check engine light on your dashboard.
Wow.
The adenosine is still building up. The sleep pressure is still rising. The engine is still having a problem. But your brain can't feel it because the caffeine is physically blocking the sensor that would normally trigger the alarm.
That is actually kind of terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So when the caffeine eventually wears off, you get that infamous crash because the tape rips off, and suddenly your brain sees that the gauge has been in the red for hours.
Precisely. That's the crash. It's the floodgates opening and all that accumulated adenosine hitting the receptors at once. So that's process S. It's all about how long you've been awake. But then you have the second part of the model, process C.
Process C.
And this is where a lot of people get confused because process C could not care less if you've been awake for 2 hours or 20 hours. It's on its own schedule.
This is the circadian pacemaker.
Yes. This is your internal, endogenous, roughly 24-hour rhythm. It's best visualized as a sine wave that oscillates throughout the day and night, regardless of your behavior. It dictates when you are biologically primed for alertness and when you are primed for sleep, based purely on the time of day.
So this operates completely independently of that sleep pressure we were just talking about.
Completely independently. This is the reason you can pull an all-nighter for a deadline, feel like absolute death at 4 a.m.
Oh yeah, the 4 a.m. wall.
Right. That's when your process C rhythm is at its absolute lowest point. It's screaming sleep, but then suddenly you might catch a second wind around 10 a.m.
I know that feeling. You feel weirdly wired and almost euphoric for an hour or two.
Exactly. You haven't slept, so your adenosine level, your process S, is through the roof. The pressure is maxed out, but your process C, that circadian wave, has swung back up to its alert phase for the morning.
So you're basically riding the wave of the circadian rhythm even though your engine is completely full of sludge.
That's a perfect way to describe it. You're running on fumes, and the power of that internal clock and the synergy that the source material talks about, that feeling of the best slept self, that only happens when these two curves align perfectly.
Like a docking procedure in space.
It is. You want the peak of high sleep pressure from process S to line up exactly with the trough of your circadian rhythm, process C, which signals your biological night.
And if they're off by even an hour or two, you crash. You get that tired but wired feeling.
That's the one. And the master conductor of this whole docking procedure, making sure everything lines up, is that SCN we mentioned earlier. And this brings us directly to the tool that everyone uses to try and manually override the conductor, melatonin.
The gummy bear in the room.
Yeah.
Look, everyone knows melatonin. It's ubiquitous. You walk into any pharmacy, any grocery store, and there's an entire wall of it. 5 milligram, 10 milligram extra strength blends with chamomile and lavender.
The marketing is everywhere.
And the cultural understanding, this story we've all been told, is that melatonin is a sedative. You take it, and it knocks you out, like a natural, gentle version of Valium or Ambien.
And that is the fundamental error. That is the core misconception that leads to all the misuse and the problems we're about to discuss. The source material is extremely explicit about this. Melatonin is not a sedative hypnotic.
So it's not a knockout drug.
It is not a knockout drug. It is what's known as a chronobiotic.
A chronobiotic. That sounds very sci-fi. Breaking it down. Chrono for time. Biotic for life. A time giver.
Exactly. Its primary function isn't to shut down the engine. Its job is to tell the driver what time it is. It's the chemical messenger of darkness. It signals to every cell in your body that night has fallen.
Let's trace that production line, because I don't think people realize how tightly controlled this is by light. We assume this stuff just floats around in our blood all day.
It's actually a beautiful biological mechanism. It all starts with your eyes, not the rods and cones used for vision, but a special set of cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but their job is simple. They're light detectors. When photons of light, especially blue light, hit these cells, they send a direct signal down the optic nerve straight to the SCN, the master clock. If the signal coming in says bright light, the SCN sends an inhibitory message to the pineal gland, which is a tiny gland deep in the center of your brain. It effectively slams on the brakes. The message is, stop, it is daytime, do not produce any melatonin.
So sunlight is literally the brake pedal for melatonin production.
It is the most powerful brake pedal we have. But when darkness falls, or when we simulate darkness by sitting in a dim room, that brake pedal lifts. The SCN stops sending the inhibitory signal.
And the pineal gland gets the green light.
The pineal gland gets the green light. It takes an amino acid called tryptophan, runs it through a few conversions, and starts pumping out melatonin into the bloodstream. And that surge of melatonin is what tells every cell in your body, okay, it's biological night, time to shift gears into repair and recovery mode.
But the source goes deeper than just saying it makes you sleepy. It gets into the specific receptors. And this was new to me. I didn't realize there were different types of locks that this melatonin key fits into. It lists MT1 and MT2. Why does the listener need to know the difference between these two?
Because it explains everything. It explains why melatonin works for some things, like jet lag, and fails miserably for others, like chronic insomnia. It's all about which lock you're trying to turn. The MT1 receptor is located largely in the SCN itself.
Back to the master clock.
Right. And its specific function is to suppress neuronal firing.
So MT1 is the quiet down signal.
It's the hush signal. It reduces what's called sleep onset latency.
That's the fancy term for how long it takes to fall asleep.
Exactly. So when melatonin, either from your own pineal gland or from a pill, hits the MT1 receptor, it quiets the wake-promoting signals coming out of the SCN. It's the hush that falls over the crowd right before the show starts. It helps you transition into sleep.
Okay, that makes sense. That feels like what people think it's doing. What about MT2?
MT2 is a really interesting one. It's also in the SCN and in the retina, but its job is completely different. Its job is phase shifting.
Phase shifting, so moving time.
It is responsible for resetting the internal clock. If you take melatonin at a specific time of day, MT2 is the receptor that gets the message and says, okay, noted. We are moving the official start of nighttime forward by an hour. Or backward, depending on when you take it.
So to put it simply, MT1 is the sleep now receptor, and MT2 is the sleep earlier tomorrow receptor.
That's a really good, simplified way to look at it, yes. And just to nerd out for one more second, because the source brings it up, there's a third player, sometimes called MT3, which is actually an enzyme called quinone reductase 2.
Okay, that one's definitely not on the bottle.
No, but it highlights melatonin's ancient original role in the body, which isn't even about sleep. It's a powerful antioxidant. It scavenges for damaging molecules called reactive oxygen species, especially in our mitochondria.
Oh, wait, so you're telling me melatonin is also cleaning up cellular rust? It's a repair molecule?
It's a major neuroprotective and cellular repair molecule. That's one of the primary reasons your body produces it naturally every night. It's there to repair the oxidative damage that occurred during the day, during wakefulness.
Okay, but, and I feel a very large but coming, there has to be a massive difference between my own pineal gland releasing a tiny, precise, physiological dose of melatonin to clean up some cells.
A huge difference.
And me swallowing a massive, unregulated 5-milligram gummy every single night for 5 years straight.
And that is the huge but that we have been building toward. That is the cliff edge. And that brings us to the elephant in the room. The entire reason we are doing this deep dive. The date on our source is January 2026, and it's referencing a paradigm shift regarding cardiovascular safety that happened in late 2025.
This is the part of the research that, as I said, it genuinely demands our full attention. For decades, the entire narrative has been that melatonin is benign. It's natural. Your body makes it. You can't overdose.
That was the dogma. It was treated like vitamin C.
But in late 2025, at the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions, a major longitudinal study was presented that it really shook the sleep medicine and cardiology communities to their core.
I remember seeing the headlines when they first dropped, but reading the actual data in this source, I mean, I had to double check the numbers because they just don't seem real. We are talking about data pulled from the TriNet X Global Research Network.
So let's be clear. This wasn't a survey of 50 college students in a basement.
No, this is big data with a capital B. The cohort was 130,828 adults, all of whom had a clinical diagnosis of insomnia. The researchers took about 65,000 people who were documented chronic melatonin users and matched them against 65,000 similar patients who did not use melatonin.
Now, before we get to the scary number, I really want you to explain this technique they use, propensity score matching. Because usually when a study comes out that says people who took drug X got sick, the first thing a skeptic says is, well, yeah, the people taking the drug are probably sicker to begin with. How did this study account for that?
That is the most critical question you can ask, and it's what makes this study so powerful. Propensity matching is a sophisticated statistical technique designed to eliminate that exact confounding bias. They didn't just grab 65,000 random non-users. For every single person in the melatonin group, they scoured the database to find their twin in the non-melatonin group.
A twin, like a literal twin.
The statistical twin. They matched them across 40 different clinical variables. They matched them for age, sex, body mass index, whether they had diabetes, their history of hypertension, other medications they were on, smoking status. They essentially created two large groups that were, on paper, identical. The only statistically significant difference between the two groups was the chronic use of melatonin.
So they mathematically stripped away all the other noise. If the melatonin user was an overweight smoker with high blood pressure, their statistical twin in the control group was also an overweight smoker with high blood pressure.
Exactly. This is as close as you can possibly get to the gold standard of a randomized controlled trial using observational real-world data. And the result was an 89% increase in incident heart failure in the melatonin group.
Whoa, stop right there. 89%. You're telling me that taking a supplement that I can buy next to the chewing gum at the grocery store almost doubles my risk of my heart failing? Frankly, that sounds alarmist. Are we sure this data is solid?
It is a shocking number. The official hazard ratio was 1.89, and it wasn't just some vague diagnosis of heart failure in the abstract. When they looked at hard outcomes, the risk of hospitalization for heart failure-related issues was 3.44 times higher in the melatonin group.
3.5 times more likely to end up in a hospital bed with a failing heart. That's staggering.
And it gets worse. When they looked at mortality all-cause death, the risk was more than doubled, a 2.09 hazard ratio.
Okay, so if I'm listening to this right now, and I have a bottle of melatonin on my nightstand that I've been dipping into pretty regularly since, say, 2022, I'm probably freaking out. This completely challenges everything we thought we knew about this benign supplement. So why? What is the proposed mechanism here?
That is the billion-dollar question that researchers are scrambling to answer now. The study shows a very strong signal, a powerful correlation, but it doesn't fully explain the causation yet. However, we do know that melatonin receptors, both MT1 and MT2, aren't just in the brain. They are present throughout the cardiovascular system.
On the heart and blood vessels themselves.
The heart muscle, on the walls of arteries. Melatonin is known to affect vascular tone, which is the constriction and dilation of blood vessels. It affects blood pressure regulation. So the hypothesis is that if you are flooding the system with these massive superphysiological doses that can be 10, 20, even 100 times what your body naturally produces every single night for years,
you're bound to break something.
You might be desensitizing those receptors or causing other off-target effects that put a chronic, low-grade stress on the heart muscle over a long period of time.
But hold on. We have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
We have to talk about reverse causality. Because even with that incredible propensity matching, isn't it still possible that we're missing something, that the study got it backwards?
Absolutely. And this is the core of the debate raging in the journals right now. The primary counterargument is this. Does melatonin cause heart failure? Or does the severe chronic insomnia that leads people to take melatonin cause heart failure?
Right, because if you're taking melatonin every single night for years, it's a safe bet your insomnia is pretty bad. You're not just taking it for fun on a Tuesday.
Exactly. And we know for an absolute proven fact that severe, untreated insomnia is a physiological wrecking ball. When you don't get restorative sleep, your sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response is stuck in the on position 2147.
You're just marinating in stress hormones like cortisol.
Constantly. Your blood pressure stays high at night when it should be dipping down. You have higher levels of systemic inflammation. Every single one of those things is a well-established direct precursor to cardiovascular disease and heart failure.
So the argument is that the people in the melatonin group were just the ones with the most stubborn, the most physiologically damaging type of insomnia, and that is what ultimately hurt their hearts, not the pill itself. The pill was just a marker for really bad sleep.
That is the reverse causality argument in a nutshell. And it is a very strong and plausible one. However, the study's authors anticipated this. That's why they did that incredibly rigorous matching in the first place. They tried to control for the severity of the underlying condition by matching diagnosis codes and other health markers.
Did they do anything else to test that theory?
They did. They ran what are called sensitivity analyses. For example, they reran the numbers but only looked at people who had refilled their melatonin prescription multiple times, say at least 90 days apart, to make absolutely sure they were only looking at truly long-term chronic users.
And what happened? Did the signal weaken?
The signal persisted. Even when you try to mathematically strip away the insomnia factor as best you can, the elevated risk associated with the melatonin itself remains.
So even if we can't say with 100% certainty that it is the pill, the conclusion from the source here is pretty damning either way.
The pragmatic clinical conclusion is this. Whether it's the drug or the underlying disease it's being used for, the population of chronic melatonin users is a very high-risk population. If you are taking this stuff every night, you are, scientifically speaking, in a danger zone for your cardiovascular health.
And the actionable takeaway from this deep dive isn't necessarily run to the bathroom and flush your pills down the toilet this second, but it is, without a doubt, stop treating this like a vitamin.
Correct. The source's recommendation is stark. It says physician supervision is mandatory for any use exceeding 4 weeks. 4 weeks, not 4 years. If you've been taking it for longer than a month, you need to have a serious conversation with your doctor about it. It is no longer a candy supplement.
That is a very stark wake-up call. But it does leave us with a massive problem. If we take away the melatonin, how do we fix the underlying sleep issue? Because as you just said, the insomnia itself is dangerous. We can't just tell people, stop taking the pill and leave them staring at the ceiling all night.
And this is where we pivot. We have to pivot from pharmacology to behavior. We have to talk about the gold standard. And I know people sometimes roll their eyes when they hear this because it requires effort. It's not as easy as popping a pill. But if not pills, then what? The source material is unequivocal. The answer is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT-I.
CBT-I. Okay, it sounds intense, like you're going to go sit on a therapist's couch and talk about your mother until you fall asleep.
It's not that kind of therapy at all. It's much more of a training program. It's like physical therapy for your brain's sleep systems. And it wins. It's the gold standard because it targets the root cognitive and behavioral causes of the insomnia. Pills just mask the symptoms. They induce a state of unconsciousness, but they don't fix the broken architecture of your sleep. CBT-I actually retrains your brain to sleep like a normal person again.
So it's a cure, not a Band-Aid.
It's as close to a cure as we have. And it has a few main components that are really fascinating and honestly a bit counterintuitive at first.
Let's walk through them, because the first one, it sounds like a form of torture. It's called sleep restriction therapy, or SRT.
It does sound like the absolute opposite of what you should do for insomnia, I know. But the logic is based directly on that process S, the homeostatic sleep drive that we talked about at the very beginning.
The adenosine buildup.
Exactly. So let's say you have a typical insomniac. They go to bed at 10 p.m. and they finally give up and get out of bed at 8 a.m. That's 10 hours they've spent in bed. But they look at their sleep tracker, or they just know from experience that they only actually slept for about 6 of those hours.
Right. So they're spending 4 hours tossing, turning, checking the clock, getting frustrated, getting anxious.
Their sleep efficiency, the ratio of time asleep to time in bed, is terrible. It's 60%. Their sleep is fragmented and shallow. So sleep restriction therapy says, okay, you only sleep for 6 hours a night, then you are only allowed to be in bed for 6 hours a night.
Wow. So if I usually sleep from, say, 2 a.m. to 8 a.m., even though I'm in bed from 10 p.m., my therapist would tell me I'm not allowed to get into bed until 2 a.m.
That is exactly what they would tell you. You restrict your time in bed to match your actual sleep time.
But won't I be completely exhausted? That sounds miserable.
You will be exhausted. That is the entire point. You are deliberately and strategically building up a massive amount of sleep pressure, a massive amount of process S. You are starving the brain of rest just enough so that when your head finally hits that pillow at 2 a.m., you don't lie there thinking, you pass out almost immediately, you force your sleep efficiency up towards 90 or 100%.
So you're condensing the sleep. You're squeezing out all those air pockets of wakefulness and anxiety.
Precisely. And once you are sleeping solidly for those 6 hours, once your efficiency is consistently over 90%, then you can gradually start to extend your time in bed by 15-minute increments. It's hard. The first week is absolutely miserable, but it works. It resets the system more powerfully than any drug on the market.
Okay, that is intense, but I can absolutely see the logic behind it. What's the second component of CBT-I?
The second component is stimulus control. This is all about breaking a negative conditioning cycle. For many, many people with chronic insomnia, the bed itself has become a battleground. You see your mattress, and your brain subconsciously cues up feelings of anxiety, frustration, and the mental habit of thinking about work.
It's like a Pavlovian response.
Yeah.
The bell rings, the dog salivates, the bed appears, the brain starts stressing out.
It's a perfect analogy. So the rule here is simple, though it can be hard to follow. It's called the 20-minute rule. If you get in bed and you are not asleep within what feels like 20 minutes, you must get up and leave the room.
Leave the bedroom entirely. But what if I'm comfortable? It's cold outside the duvet.
It doesn't matter. The goal is to reforge the mental connection that bed is sleep, and only sleep. You have to break the association that bed being awake and frustrated. So you go to another room, you keep the lights extremely dim, and you do something incredibly boring.
Like what?
Read a dull textbook, fold laundry, listen to a very calm piece of music, and you only return to bed when you feel that wave of sleepiness actually returning.
That requires some serious discipline. It's so much easier to just grab your phone and start scrolling.
Which is the single worst thing you can possibly do, but we will definitely get to screens in a minute. The third and final major component of CBT-I is cognitive restructuring. And this directly addresses the catastrophic thinking that plagues so many insomniacs.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah.
You're lying there at 2 a.m. thinking, if I don't fall asleep right now, I am going to be a complete zombie tomorrow. I'll blow the big presentation, I'll probably get fired, and then I'll lose the house.
That exact spiral, that escalation of negative thoughts. That thought process itself causes a massive physiological release of cortisol and adrenaline. You are literally startling yourself awake with your own thoughts. So cognitive restructuring helps you to challenge those thoughts in the moment.
How?
By asking yourself, is that really true? Will I really get fired? Or is it more likely that I'll just be a bit tired and grumpy and I'll need some extra coffee?
It's about lowering the stakes,
Yeah.
taking the drama out of it.
Exactly. I've survived on a bad night's sleep before. I will survive this one too. By lowering the emotional stakes, you lower the physiological arousal, which then makes it easier to actually fall asleep.
It's like mental jujitsu.
Yeah.
You're using the mind's momentum against itself. So CBT-I is the heavy lifting. That's the full renovation of your sleep habits.
Yeah.
But the source also talks about behavioral hygiene. This feels more like the daily maintenance.
It is. And they use the term environmental engineering, which I love. It frames it as an active process. You have to engineer your cave. If your bedroom is not optimized for your biology, you are fighting a constant uphill battle.
And it says 2 variables matter more than almost anything else: temperature and light.
The big two.
What's that temperature? My spouse and I fight about this constantly. I like it cold. They like it warm. Who wins scientifically?
Science says you win. Sorry to your spice. The recommended ambient temperature range for optimal sleep is between 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 15 to 19 degrees Celsius.
That is chilly. I mean, we're talking about needing a good blanket. Why does it need to be that cold? What's the mechanism?
It's all about thermoregulation. For you to initiate and maintain deep sleep, your core body temperature, or CBT, needs to drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. But interestingly, for your core to drop its temperature, you need to be able to release that heat out into the environment, primarily through your extremities.
Through your hands and feet.
Yes, and your face. It's a process called vasodilation. The blood vessels in your hands and feet open up, they get wider to dump heat from your core. If the room is too hot, that heat exchange can't happen efficiently. You trap the heat, your core temperature stays elevated, and your brain doesn't get the powerful biological trigger it needs to transition into deep sleep.
So that's why people will stick 1 foot out from under the covers.
Sticking 1 foot out is a perfect instinctive way to use a radiator to dump core body heat. So yes, crank the AC or open a window.
Okay, now for the big one, light. The source uses this term I love, the digital sunset. The imagery is perfect, but actually implementing it is, well, it's hard.
This is the hardest challenge for modern humans, without a doubt. Our biology requires darkness to trigger that melatonin release we talked about. But specifically, our biology is incredibly sensitive to blue light. the light in the 380 to 500 nanometer wavelength range.
And that's the light that's blasting out of our phones, our laptops, our TVs, even our energy-efficient LED light bulbs in the house.
Yes, especially those LEDs. And remember the mechanism we discussed earlier. Light hits those special cells in the retina, which tells the SCN to hit the brakes on the pineal gland. When you are scrolling through social media or checking work emails at 11 p.m. in bed, you are literally blasting your master clock with a signal that says, "It is high noon, stay awake."
So you're hitting the brake pedal on your own sleep hormone right at the exact moment you want to be hitting the gas.
That's precisely what you're doing. And I hear people say, "Oh, but I use night mode on my phone. The screen is warmer." The source is pretty skeptical about that being a complete solution. It says that while it might help a little by reducing the blue light, the sheer intensity, the lux of the light source so close to your face, plus the cognitive engagement of what you're doing,
The drama on Twitter.
it's still keeping the brain in an alert, awake state. The official digital sunset protocol is clear. Cut all screens 60 to 90 minutes before your desired dead time.
90 minutes. In the digital age, that feels like a lifetime. What are people supposed to do for an hour and a half with no screens? Talk to their families.
Radical, I know. Read a physical book under dim, warm light. Listen to a podcast or calm music. Meditate. Stretch. But if you want to truly engineer that best slept self, the source says it's non-negotiable. And if you absolutely cannot do it, it suggests using circadian integrity tools like high-quality blackout curtains or a good eye mask to create that perfect darkness. But really, nothing beats just turning the screens off.
The source also mentions relaxation technology, which I found interesting. It specifically brought up modern massage chairs. I usually think of those as a luxury item you try at the mall, not a serious medical tool for sleep.
It connects directly to the state of your nervous system. We spend almost our entire day in the sympathetic nervous state, that's the fight or flight system. We're dealing with deadlines, traffic, stressful news. Sleep requires a profound shift into the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest system.
And it's incredibly hard to just flip that switch instantly. You can't go from frantically finishing a spreadsheet to being in deep REM sleep 5 minutes later.
The gap is too wide for most people to cross. The source suggests using what it calls recovery technology, things like massage chairs with mechanical rollers and air compression bags, to physically force that transition.
How does that work?
It stimulates mechanoreceptors in your muscles and skin, which has been shown to reduce cortisol levels. It physically relaxes muscle tension. It basically serves as a bridge, a transition zone to get you from the high-strung stress of your workday to a state of calm that is permissive for sleep onset.
A buffer zone. I like that. Now, speaking of high stress, the source has this whole fascinating section on high performance and military protocols. This is for the people who literally cannot get a consistent 8 hours. The executives, the soldiers, the new parents.
This is really cutting-edge stuff. It's about damage control and performance optimization under duress. The first concept is something called sleep banking.
Which sounds like financial advice. Can I actually put sleep into a savings account for later?
In a way, you can. The research shows that if you know a period of high stress or sleep deprivation is coming, a military mission, a product launch, a trip with a newborn, you can bank sleep in the days leading up to it.
So you oversleep on purpose.
Yes. The data shows that getting 9 to 10 hours of sleep per night for 3 or 4 nights preceding the event preserves cognitive accuracy and reaction time significantly better than just sticking to your normal baseline sleep.
So you can actually stock up on rest. I always thought sleep debt only worked one way. You lose it and it's gone for good.
You can't bank it forever, but you can absolutely build a short-term buffer. It protects your brain from the most severe, immediate declines in performance when the sleep deprivation finally hits. It's like carb loading before running a marathon.
Okay, and then there's tactical napping.
Not just any nap, a tactical nap. The military is extremely specific about this. The duration is key. 20 to 30 minutes maximum.
Why that very specific window? Why not an hour, which feels much more restorative?
Because if you sleep for an hour, you risk sliding down into slow wave sleep, which is the deepest stage of sleep. If you get woken up abruptly out of that deep sleep, you experience something called sleep inertia.
The nap hangover.
Exactly. That groggy, disoriented feeling where you don't know who you are or what year it is for about 20 minutes. In a combat zone or right before a big meeting, you cannot afford that cognitive fog. The goal of a tactical nap is to stay in the lighter stages of sleep, flush out just enough of that adenosine to take the edge off your fatigue, and wake up sharp and alert.
And what about the timing of that nap?
The best time is during the natural circadian dip, For most people, that's in the early afternoon, usually between 1 and 3 p.m., when your core body temperature drops slightly and alertness naturally flags. That's the sweet spot to sneak in that 20-minute reset.
Now I have to ask about this, the military sleep technique. This went viral on the internet a while ago, but the source details it as a serious, practiced protocol. How do you actually train yourself to fall asleep in 2 minutes? Because that sounds like a superpower.
The source says it requires about 6 weeks of consistent practice to master, so it's not magic. It's a form of trained biofeedback. The method is a systematic, top-down relaxation of the body. It starts with the face. You have to consciously relax every single muscle in your face, your jaw, your tongue, the tiny muscles around your eyes.
The tongue is a weird one. I think most people have their tongue pressed against the roof of their mouth all the time without even realizing it.
They do. The instruction is to let it float. Then, you drop your shoulders as far down as they'll go, releasing all the tension you hold there. Then you relax your upper and lower arm on one side, then the other. You breathe out deeply, relaxing your chest. Finally, you work your way down, relaxing your legs from your thighs all the way down to your feet.
So you're physically shutting down the body, part by part, like powering down a complex machine.
And once the body's limp, you move to the mental part. You have to clear your mind for 10 seconds. The source suggests using one of two visualizations. Picture yourself lying in a canoe on a perfectly calm lake with nothing but a clear blue sky above you. Or picture yourself lying in a black velvet hammock in a pitch-black room.
What if your brain starts making a to-do list for tomorrow?
If thoughts intrude, you are supposed to repeat the words, don't think, don't think, don't think, over and over for 10 seconds.
It's basically a forced, rapid meditation.
It is. And for a soldier in a combat zone who might only have 10 minutes to get some rest while sitting upright in the back of a truck, being able to trigger that shutdown state almost instantly is a genuine survival skill.
That is incredible. And speaking of survival skills for the modern world, let's just touch on travel.
Yeah.
Jet lag. The source makes a clear distinction between flying east and flying west.
This is incredibly practical for anyone who flies. Westward travel, so flying from New York to Hawaii, for example, is generally easier on the body. You are delaying your internal clock, which means you just have to stay up a bit later. The protocol for that is to seek out evening light when you arrive to help push your rhythm back.
But eastward travel is the beast. Flying from Hawaii back to New York, or from New York to London.
Eastward is much harder because you have to advance your clock. You have to force your body to believe that morning has arrived when it feels like the middle of the night. So the protocol is the opposite. Seek bright morning light immediately upon arrival. Get outside without sunglasses. And this is one of the few places the source recommends melatonin. Take a very low dose, maybe 0.5 to 1 milligram at your new local bedtime, to help force that phase shift via the MT2 receptor.
So melatonin does have a place, but it's as a strategic precision tool. It's for jet lag or specific diagnosed circadian rhythm disorders, not for general, I had a busy day and my mind is racing, insomnia.
Exactly. It is a tool for shifting the clock, not a hammer for knocking yourself out.
We have covered a huge amount of ground here. We've done the deep biology of the two-process model, the really scary heart failure statistics from 2025, the CBT-I solution, the military hacks. As we start to wrap up, I just want to touch on the regulatory aspect of this. Because if you're listening to this in the UK or the EU, you might be very confused because you can't just go buy a bottle of melatonin at the supermarket.
No, you can't. In the UK, across the European Union, Australia, and many other countries, melatonin is a prescription-only medication. It is treated as the powerful hormone that it is. In the United States, however, due to the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, it is classified as a dietary supplement.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, does not test it for safety, purity, or efficacy before it hits the shelf. The manufacturer is responsible for ensuring it's safe, but the oversight is minimal.
That is wild to me. So the bottle I buy at the store could have anything in it.
And studies have shown that it often does. The source mentions the potency gap. One major study found that the actual melatonin content in commercially available supplements ranged from 80 to 83% to plus 478% of what was listed on the label.
So some had almost none, and some had 5 times the dose.
Exactly. Some gummies were found to have 500% of the labeled dose. Others had none at all. And many contained other undeclared substances like serotonin. It is truly the Wild West. So if you are in the US and you feel you must use it for a strategic purpose, like jet lag, the advice is to look for a bottle with a USP verified or NSF stamp on it. That means a third party has at least verified the contents match the label. Otherwise, you are flying blind.
That is incredibly important advice. So let's try to bring this all together, this quest for the best slept self.
Huh.
It really feels like the core message is that we need a profound mentality shift. We have to stop treating sleep like it's a nuisance to be dealt with.
We absolutely do. That 2025 data is a blaring wake-up call, pun intended. We have to move from this pill for every ill mentality to a hygiene-first architectural approach. We spend so much time and effort engineering our waking lives, our careers, our workout routines, our diets. We optimize everything. But we treat sleep, this fundamental biological imperative, like an afterthought.
Or just an inconvenience that we try to bypass with a gummy bear.
Precisely. We forget that sleep isn't passive. It's an active process. It involves massive hormonal shifts and cellular repair mechanisms, and if we mess with them carelessly, there are consequences. The goal isn't just getting to sleep, it's the strategic design of our rest.
So here's the challenge for you, the listener, as you finish this deep dive. We've given you the entire toolkit, the digital sunset, the temperature check, the 20-minute rule.
Our challenge is this. Try one behavioral change tonight. Just one. Don't take your phone into the bedroom. Or turn your thermostat down to 65. Just see what happens.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. We've talked about how we use technology to stay awake, and now we're using all this new technology, wearable rings, mattress sensors, apps, to obsessively monitor our sleep. But ask yourself, are we actually sleeping better? Or are we just stressing ourselves out about our sleep score? Maybe the ultimate sleep hack is to stop measuring it and start feeling it again. To trust your body's signals, not just the data on a screen.
That's a very deep thought to end on. A powerful one.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Sleep well tonight. Literally.